Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic. Let's do it. What's the creepiest thing that your kid does? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. When I was 16, I was babysitting for a 9-month-old baby. After putting her down in her crib, sound asleep, I quietly walk downstairs and sit on the couch to watch a little TV. I start to hear the baby fussing and crying on the baby monitor, so I head back upstairs only to find the baby sleeping soundly in her crib. I was a little confused and thought this was kind of weird, but I wasn't totally creeped out yet. When I got downstairs and heard the baby on the baby monitor crying again, I got the craziest chill down my spine. Head back upstairs. Baby in front of me still sound asleep. Back downstairs I am sitting and looking at possessed baby monitor, when all of a sudden, a very low, gargly voice comes on over the monitor saying, "Hush, baby." I turned that shit off and sat in silence until the parents came home. Come to find out, the neighbors had the same baby monitor system, and apparently this was not the first time they'd picked up the sound from the neighbor's house. A warning would have been nice. When I was a nanny, this 6-year-old boy had this Christmas elf doll that sat on his shelf and looked terrifying. The kid would tell me every day how it came to life at night and danced around his room and told him secrets. One time I made the mistake of asking what kind of secrets, and the kid freaked out and shouted at me, "I can't tell you. He told me not to tell anyone." Then he stood on his bed and shouted at the doll, "Move! Move! I've seen him move! Move!" My 4-year-old son regularly grips his penis from the outside of his pants in a sort of claw-like fashion between his forefingers and palm. Then he'll pull it outwards, as if trying to lengthen it. If you ask him what he's doing, he will always respond, "Just keeping my penis in tip-top shape." Good on me. My 3-year-old was in bed for the night, a time during which she often sings songs to her dolls. 2 floors down, I was listening on the monitor as I mostly surfed Reddit. Her song was sweet, and I was fairly moved. "I love my mommy and my daddy. They're the best friends, and I love, love, love them so much." This verse went on for a couple of minutes, and I thought it was the greatest song ever. Then it took a somewhat darker turn, and then they died, and it was just me and baby, me and my baby. The last part, in a little 3-year-old girl voice over a cheap baby monitor, was pretty chilling. My 4-year-old daughter sleepwalks and talks sometimes. I woke up early one morning while it was still dark out. I showered and whatnot, then went to leave my bedroom. I opened the door and there she is, standing down the hallway, backlit by a nightlight we keep in the hallway in this slumped but standing position, just blabbering, mumbling something. I couldn't help but think of Dawn of the Dead, when that little girl just launches herself and nabs that dude. So what am I to do? I calmly turned on my heels, shut the door, and leaned against it, fully preparing myself for the zombie onslaught. Apparently she was coherent enough to see that I had left her, so she starts whining and it woke her up enough to actually speak, so I knew that she wasn't a zombie. Sleepwalking is no joke. I saw it for the first time pretty recently, and it can be dangerous, so you need to be vigilant, but that one's wild. My son is only 2 weeks old, so nothing yet, but this thread reminds me of back when I was studying to become a teacher. During the summer breaks, I'd work as a holiday temp at a kindergarten. There was this one kid, a 3-year-old boy, who virtually needed 24-hour supervision. He didn't have a grown-up covering him all the time, but close, and we had to be 2 outside on the playground duty when he was there. Anyway, one time he was in the sandbox and I was playing football with some other kids. I look over and I see him picking up a metal shovel about 1 meter long. He lifts it over his head and walks towards a little girl who's also in the box. At that point, I've begun running and shouting, "Michael, no!" But he proceeds to whack her over the back of her head, thank God hitting her with the flat side. He's about to effing hit her a second time when I arrive to stop him. The girl was flat out and bleeding, but luckily not much else happened to her. After that, we had to keep an adult on the little psycho full time. I don't know what happened to him later on, but I'm guessing he's in prison or in a mental ward now. He had no idea what was right or wrong, and apart from onsets of enormous rage, he never showed any emotions nor empathy at all. Sociopath in the making. When I was little, we lived in a creepy house in Miami. My cousins were our neighbors, which was really awesome since we were all around the same age and got to play all the time. One night, one of my cousins slept over. We were like 6 or 7, and I woke up the next morning and found her sitting up, staring at one of my creepy windows. She has tears in her eyes, I guess, from not blinking in a while or being really frightened. I asked her what was wrong, and she acted startled hearing my voice. She said, "I tried waking you up. You wouldn't wake up. There was a boy here and he kept putting his mouth back on." And she motioned something hitting their jaw against their face to reattach it. What the F? Fast forward to years and years later, her and her family moved to Orlando, and I brought it up one night at a family gathering. Say something like, "Hey dude, you remember that one time you saw a little boy in my room without his jaw?" She completely lost her shit, ran out of the pool, we were all in, and went inside. This is not mine, but one of my colleagues told me earlier tonight before I saw this thread. His young daughter regularly tells him and his wife they are not her real parents. They are. She has names for her real parents. The dad is Richard and the mom is Bitchard. Bitchard died when the daughter was a baby. But she keeps it up further than that. Whenever they give her something new to try, his example was pomegranate, she will offhandedly remark, "Richard and I had pomegranate at the beach just last week." She has a full backstory for them. They lived in a 3-room house with moderate furnishings and not a lot of money. She can describe the car they had, the things they would do, and everything. Richard is not an invisible friend either. She has 9 of those, all with weird names like Fleeb. Edit. Holy shit. Thanks for all your replies. I've been lolling myself at a lot of them. To clarify, he's not concerned about her, nor does he think she's doing it seriously and believes it. She just thinks it's a funny game to play to see her parents get butthurt by those kind of comments. She's 3 years old. I can't remember what the other imaginary friends' name are. 3 of them had ordinary names. When my colleague listed them, he went Hannah, Brian, Steve, Fleeb, and the rest were all messed up names, but Fleeb has stuck in my mind because it was the first real random one, he said. You shouldn't knock names like Fleeb. I'm sure someone's going to read this and someday there'll be a kid named Fleeb or Bookcase or I don't know. Anyway, who cares? Not me, but a friend. His 5-year-old brother sleepwalks. They have an alarm system set up to respond to movement in the lower part of the house. One night it goes off, so everyone gets up and notices the little guy isn't in his bed. They go downstairs, and my friend finally finds him, in the basement, sitting cross-legged facing the open door leading outside, his eyes wide open, but he's still in a state of sleep. He asks his brother why the door was open, and he looks at him and he says, "I'm letting them in." When my son was about 4, he had an imaginary friend named George, but it went beyond just imaginary. I would hear him have conversations with George and the alien, and when I tried to convince him that George wasn't real, he would persist. He would often mention very adult things that George would say, although I can't remember right now. The creepy thing was that now my son is 10, and the other day in the car he mentioned George. Not like, "Hey, remember that imaginary friend I had? Ha ha ha." But instead, whatever happened to this guy? I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. When I tried to tell him he was an imaginary speech, he thought I was joking. I could see him in the rearview mirror pondering the whole situation. When I was about 18, my 4-year-old sister came to the table where I and my mother were preparing dinner. She reached onto the table and grabbed a bread knife whose blade was as long as her little arm. I eyed her, ready to reach out and snatch it if it looked like she was going to walk away. My family believed in teaching us not to be unnecessarily afraid of objects, so she could hold it if she stood still. She half turned, and I reach over to grasp her shoulder, but just before my fingers touched her, she looked up at me, smiled sweetly, and slid the knife back onto the table. "Oh no," she said, in her high, dulcet voice, as if weighing options much too small. And then she walked away, leaving Mom and I staring after each other. There have been several times when I've gone in to check on my 2-year-old son to find him standing in the dark in the corner of his crib with his eyes wide open staring at the door. It's not like he just woke up and stood up. He's been standing there staring at the door for an indeterminate amount of time without making a sound. Then when I try to talk to him, it's like he wakes up, as if he were in a daze or something. Sometimes I'll walk by and he'll just be sitting in his crib silently. Totally weird because he's a very social, loving, and outgoing kid. Gives me the willies every time. I'm terrified to move him into the big boy bed for fear that I'll wake up to find him standing in the corner of my room, just staring at me. 2 items from my daughter when she was younger. 1, while walking home from daycare, I was pushing the stroller, asking her how her day was. She suddenly turned around and in the stroller said, "Mommy's going to give me a baby brother next spring." My wife and I hadn't discussed anything like that with her, but lo and behold, Mrs. Olaf got pregnant about a month after my little girl said that, and her brother was born the following March. 2. The next one really freaked me out. She was in bed. I had just read her bedtime story when she looked at me and asked, "Daddy, what happened to your sister?" My sister was born first to my parents. She lived about 2 weeks, then died due to complications with the delivery, and my parents went on to have 3 boys. Now, my sister was born the day before my mom's birthday, so every year Mom would get very quiet and depressed around her birthday. My sister was never discussed for fear it would upset Mom. After my daughter said that to me, I asked Mom if she had discussed it with her. She hadn't. She also used to claim to see the old lady that used to live there sometimes. The old lady had died in the house. Very freaky.